Have you ever found yourself in a situation where no matter how clearly you explain, they twist your words and make you feel like you're the one at fault? Maybe you tried to be honest. You tried to defend yourself. You tried to preserve something you thought was fair. But instead of understanding, all you got was a never-ending battle where every explanation became ammunition used against you. If that sounds familiar, then hear this. You are not weak when you go silent. You're stronger than ever before. In this video, I'm not here to tell you to argue. I won't tell you to forgive or forget. What I will share is a strategy that very few can master, but when you do, it can completely shift the power dynamic in a relationship with a manipulative person. Watch this video until the end, because your silence isn't just self-protection, it's the loudest declaration you can make. I no longer belong to your game. And if you're on this journey of healing, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. This is where we don't just learn how to walk away, we learn how to come back to life. You see, when you try to explain yourself to a narcissist, you're not engaging in communication, you're walking into a trap, a never-ending one. And the more you try to clarify, the more you lose control. With a normal person, explaining might lead to understanding. But with a narcissist, every conversation is a chess match, and the only thing they want is to win. Not connection, not clarity, control over your emotions. They don't listen to understand. They listen to find weakness, to distort, to manipulate. And if you fall into that familiar trap of, I need to make things clear, I need them to understand me, you're handing them full access to your mind, your emotions, and your peace. I get it, not reacting goes against the instincts of so many good-hearted people. When someone lies about you, you want to defend yourself. When you're treated unfairly, you want justice. But here's the hard truth. Your emotional reaction is their oxygen. They don't need you to love them. They just need to know you still care. And to a narcissist, your care is measured by your tears, your anger, your panic, the way you fight to explain yourself or to win them back. It may sound counterintuitive, but silence, when used correctly, is your loudest resistance. When you stop explaining, stop defending, stop feeding them emotional energy, you're reclaiming your power. You're stepping off the stage of their drama. And that terrifies them, because for the first time, they're no longer in control of the script. You don't owe them an answer to every loaded question. You don't owe them a counterpoint to every accusation. You don't need to prove your goodness to people committed to misunderstanding you, because the ones who need to know your heart already do, and the ones who refuse to see it. No explanation will ever be enough. Imagine being pulled into a pit of quicksand. If you thrash and struggle, you sink deeper. But if you stay calm, center yourself, and move deliberately, you have a chance to escape. The narcissist's game is designed to unbalance you. That's why emotional stability is your greatest act of defiance. Let me be clear, this isn't easy. Choosing not to react, especially under attack, is an intentional and powerful act. It's like stepping onto a battlefield unarmed, not because you're defenseless, but because you've realized the only way to win is not to play. And this is something you can apply right now. When they send a passive-aggressive message, don't reply. When they provoke you through mutual friends, don't explain. When they bait you with emotionally loaded questions, respond with steel, I hear you. I need time. Or best of all, nothing at all. Every time you choose not to react, you reclaim a piece of yourself. And eventually you realize you don't need their validation. You don't need a dramatic closure. You only need peace. And peace begins the moment you stop performing for someone who was never really listening. Once you've learned not to react, another question naturally arises. But what do I do when I still have to interact with them? Because not everyone can completely disappear from a narcissist's life. They might be your colleague, a family member, or even an ex you co-parent with. And that's where a vital skill comes in: emotional distancing. Now, emotional distance doesn't mean becoming cold, cruel, or unfeeling. It means you're actively protecting your heart in a space where safety is no longer guaranteed. Think of it like this. You might have to stand in a room full of smoke, but you can still wear a mask and open a window. You can't stop others from being toxic, but you can stop your lungs from absorbing the poison. So how do you do that? First, keep it short and non-personal. When a narcissist tries to lure you into emotionally charged conversations through vague questions, subtle accusations, or long-winded calls, you don't have to answer everything. You don't owe them an emotional conversation. You don't need to lay it all out. What you need is a simple, clear, neutral response. Examples. I'll respond when I'm ready. I understand your point. Let's talk when things are clearer. No explanations, no justifications, no emotional openings. Respond as if you were a corporate assistant replying to a dry work email, polite, measured, and completely emotionally detached. Next, train yourself to wear a neutral face. They will look for any sign of emotional access, your eyes, your tone, even your silence. So when you do have to interact, imagine putting on an invisible emotional cloak, one that shields your inner world from being exposed. You can smile softly, you can nod, but always ask yourself, am I responding out of emotion or out of courtesy? If it's emotion, pause. If it's courtesy, control it. Most importantly, don't share personal information. They're not asking because they care. They're asking to extract. Everything you tell them, from where you went, who you saw, or how you feel, can and will be weaponized. So the rule is say less than you think and keep more than you feel. You don't need to say you're doing fine. You don't need to say you're sad. You don't need to explain your healing journey. Save that for the people who have earned the right to know. And if they poke at old wounds, remind yourself, just because someone disrespects my boundaries doesn't mean I have to tear them down to make them feel comfortable. Every time you maintain emotional distance, you're sending yourself a signal. I am responsible for my emotional safety. No one gets to hurt me unless I allow it. Distance isn't coldness. Distance is clarity. It's a statement that says, I may be in the same room as you, but I no longer belong to your world. Sooner or later, after enough moments of not reacting, not sharing, not letting your emotions be hijacked, you'll arrive at a very specific place. A quiet, still place. One where you're no longer angry. You're not as sad as you used to be either. Instead, what you begin to feel is a kind of silent clarity. And you ask yourself, why did I hurt so much over someone who never truly saw me? The answer is this. You weren't grieving the loss of that person. You were grieving the belief that the love they offered you was real. You were hurting because you gave your heart to something fake, and you didn't know it was fake until it collapsed. But once you see that truth, everything shifts. You no longer crave an apology. You no longer need them to acknowledge what they did. You don't even want a dramatic sense of closure anymore. Instead, you start to see clearly. You don't need them to validate your worth. And that is when awareness begins. You stop living for someone else's recognition. You begin to live to understand yourself, to honor what your heart truly needs, not what you were trained to think you should need. You'll look back at the tears you cried, the long texts you sent, the phone calls you waited for. And you won't feel shame. You'll feel pride. Because you once loved with everything you had. You once hoped with all your heart. You once fought not for them, but for the idea of something beautiful that you believed in. And there's nothing wrong with believing. The only mistake would be continuing to believe after you've seen the truth. And now, you've seen it. You didn't lose love. You lost the illusion of someone who played the role of loving you. You didn't lose a relationship. You broke free from an emotional addiction, a cycle of pain and hope that had you trapped in loops you didn't even recognize. You were manipulated into thinking you needed them to feel whole. But the moment you stopped chasing, stopped explaining, you discovered you're still breathing, still standing, still laughing, and you're slowly coming back to life. They're no longer the center of your universe, and you're no longer their emotional fuel. You no longer hurt because they didn't love you. You're now learning to love yourself, and that is the one kind of love no one can ever take away. One day they might come back. Maybe it's a random message, a casual, "How have you been?" a subtle like on your recent photo, or even an apology that sounds suspiciously sincere. And suddenly the memories return, those beautiful moments, the times you believed there was something truly special between you. You'll wonder, could this time be different? Have they really changed? But you need to remember this. The person who once hurt you the most also knows exactly how to reopen that wound. And if you go back, not because they've truly changed, but because you still long for the illusion you once clung to, then you're walking yourself back into the very place you once begged to escape. Narcissists don't get better because they've awakened. They get better at pretending. They know you need to see kindness, so they act kind. They know you need remorse, so they offer apologies. But behind that polished mask is the same calculating mind, the same hunger for control, and the same ego that refuses to take real responsibility. If they truly changed, they wouldn't need you there to prove it. They'd live better, live with integrity, even when no one's watching. But if they're working hard to convince you they've changed, be cautious. Because sometimes it's not you they want, it's their power over you, restored. You've come so far, you've endured so much, you've grown beyond what they ever expected. Don't let a little late-stage kindness pull you back to square one. Don't let a few sweet words erase the nights you cried yourself to sleep. And most of all, don't let loneliness trick you into believing this is better than nothing. No. You deserve something real, something safe, something truly healthy, not a rebranded version of your old pain. They can fake love, but they can't fake growth. Because growth doesn't come from words. It shows in actions, in consistency, in taking ownership without deflection. And that's something a narcissist rarely does, unless they've gone through deep, painful healing on their own, with no one left to manipulate. If you go back, you're not just risking your healing, you're sending a message. I'm willing to accept harm as long as it comes with a pretty apology. And that is the fastest way to reopen a wound, this time deeper and crueler than before. Hold your boundaries. Let them live with the consequences of what they did. Not because you're bitter, but because you've grown. Because now you understand going back to someone who hasn't truly changed is a betrayal of yourself. You thought it was over when you went silent, when you stopped reacting, when you withdrew from the battlefield. You believed that once you disappeared from their story, they would disappear from your life. But the truth is, for a narcissist, goodbye is never the end. Because to them, silence isn't closure, it's a threat. It's a denial of power. It's a wordless message that says, I've stepped out of your orbit and I'm thriving. And they can't stand that. No longer holding the spotlight in your life, they shift into the role of observer. But don't be fooled. This isn't romantic regret. It's control rebranded. Softer, subtler, still toxic. They don't want you back because they love you. They just need to know they still affect you. They watch your stories from anonymous accounts. They ask mutual friends about you. They start interacting again but never say why. They manufacture coincidences, showing up where you hang out, sending vague texts, reacting to a post with a laughing emoji. Every action whispers the same thing. I'm still watching, and I want you to know that. But remember, watching is not love. Obsession is not remorse. And their silent presence doesn't mean they value you. It only proves they can't handle losing control. To a narcissist, your freedom is the ultimate evidence of their failure. They thought you couldn't live without them, that you'd collapse once they turned away. But when you go silent, when you grow, when you shine without them, they don't just feel loss. They feel threatened. That's why they can't look away. Not because you're the one they loved the most, but because you're the one they couldn't fully destroy. They don't understand how you got stronger, why you didn't fight back, why you didn't break. They start questioning their own worth, something they've never had to do before, and that drives them mad. But you owe them no explanation for your freedom. No warning, no announcement. Just live powerfully, peacefully, and without looking back. Because nothing wounds a narcissist more than being forgotten in silence. One of the most toxic legacies a narcissist leaves behind isn't just the pain. It's the guilt you feel when you start to thrive without them. When you start laughing more. When you find peace without needing them. When you fall in love again or simply fall in love with yourself. A voice inside you might whisper, Am I being too heartless? What if they're suffering and I'm just moving on? Does my happiness mean I've forgotten them too fast? That is the residue of emotional manipulation. They made you believe that your existence must orbit their needs, their emotions, their approval. They taught you that love equals sacrifice, so much so that you traded pieces of yourself just to keep the peace. And now, when you're finally rising, it feels like you're doing something wrong. But let me make this clear. Healing is not betrayal, peace is not selfish, and thriving does not mean your love was fake. In fact, it's because your love was real that the pain cut so deep. And it's because you've walked through that pain that you now deserve to heal on your own terms in your own time without asking anyone for permission. The narcissist might be gone, but their voice lingers disguised as doubt, guilt, and self-blame. But you need to know this. You were not born to save others by sacrificing yourself. You are not responsible for the consequences of actions you didn't commit. And you don't have to delay your happiness just because someone else didn't know how to value you when they had the chance. They had their opportunity. They saw you in your most vulnerable state. And instead of healing you, they manipulated. Instead of protecting, they controlled. Instead of loving, they possessed. So if today you wake up with a genuine smile, with a lighter heart, with a new dream blooming inside you, receive it as the reward you've earned. No guilt, no apology, and absolutely no going back just to comfort the one who once broke you. Your joy is not a provocation, it's living proof that you made it through. Let them live with their choices. And you keep walking forward. Don't look back. And if ever your heart starts to waver, remember this. You didn't walk away from love. You walked away from the distortion of love. And there is nothing wrong with choosing yourself. You once thought that what you needed most was an apology, a confession, a moment where they'd look at you and say, "I was wrong." But in the end, what you truly needed wasn't their regret. It was your own liberation. You walked through emotional hell. You doubted yourself. You stayed out of hope, out of fear, out of the belief that love could fix it all. But now, you've changed. You're no longer the one begging for clarity from someone who never truly listened. You no longer need them to feel whole. You don't need a perfect ending because you've already rewritten the story yourself. And if they regret it now, if they realize you were the only one who ever loved them for real, if they silently watch you restless and full of what-ifs, that's fine. But it doesn't matter anymore. Because you're not here to be someone's regret. You're here to be free. You're not the victim in this story. You're the survivor. The main character who stood back up rose from the wreckage and began to write a new chapter, one defined by strength, dignity, and peace. Don't go back. Don't wait for justice from someone who never gave you fairness to begin with. And most of all, don't sacrifice your healing journey just to receive one fleeting look of remorse. You've come further than they ever expected. You're stronger than they ever wanted. And now you're living not to prove anything, but simply because you deserve to live fully. If these words resonate with your heart, hit that subscribe button. Let this journey be more than reflection. Let it be transformation. We're not just learning how to walk away. We're learning how to come home to ourselves.